Key points: public expectation and reality. Public optimism for Isa's leadership, which hoped for a unified and independent judiciary, was unmet as he left a divided Supreme Court. Comparative legacy. Both Isa and Chaudhry were seen as judges with reformist zeal. Chaudhry enjoyed more public support due to the lawyers' movement, whereas Isa worked within a fractured judiciary, facing limitations on addressing human rights issues or challenging the establishment. Historical context and influence. The article outlines Isa's rise post-lawyers' movement, with a career marked by anti-establishment judgments like the Faizabad sit-in case, which contrasted with earlier support of establishment-related initiatives. Judicial power and establishment role. Chaudhry's tenure included a degree of autonomy due to discrete establishment support, allowing activism in sensitive cases. Isa, however, operated under overt establishment influence, limiting judicial independence and activism. High-profile cases and political tensions. Both Isa and Chaudhry's judicial decisions were influenced by political tensions with governing parties, impacting their perceived neutrality. Isa's judgments in PTI-related cases reflect this influence and are seen as comparable to Chaudhry's anti-PPP decisions. Absence of major legacy. Isa and Chaudhry's tenures are perceived as lacking landmark legal legacies and remain defined by their political confrontations, Isa with the PTI and Chaudhry with Musharraf. Changing judicial environment. The judiciary's autonomy and public support seen in Chaudhry's time waned during Isa's tenure, impacted by the establishment's overt influence and a loss of public fervor from the lawyers' movement. Crux. The article reflects on the legacy of former Chief Justice Qazi Faiz Isa and draws parallels with his predecessors, particularly Iftikhar Chaudhry. Both justices are seen as figures shaped by their circumstances and limited by the evolving influence of the establishment. Isa's tenure saw a more divided judiciary, constrained by the establishment's overt involvement, unlike Chaudhry, who operated with greater public support during the lawyers' movement. Despite high hopes, Isa's tenure did not result in significant judicial reforms or memorable judgments and is largely defined by his stance against the PTI, akin to Chaudhry's anti-Musharraf legacy. Key points: Istikhara and secularism in judiciary. The editorial compares religious practices like istikhara with India's constitutional commitment to secularism, suggesting that personal beliefs should remain private for judges. Justice Chandrachud's religious associations. Chandrachud publicly acknowledged his Hindu faith, attended a Ganapati puja with PM Modi, and referenced divine guidance for the Ayodhya case decision. These actions deviate from judicial norms of impartiality and discretion. Ayodhya verdict's religious leaning. The Ayodhya judgment, influenced by Chandrachud's faith, marked a shift from treating religious matters as non-justiciable, granting disputed land to Hindu claimants, even though the mosque's demolition was ruled a criminal act. Liberal reforms with limited reach. While Chandrachud supported reforms in gay rights and individual liberty, these did not extend to many political prisoners, who continued to suffer during his tenure. This selective liberalism has drawn criticism. High-profile detentions. Several prisoners of conscience, such as Umar Khalid and Stan Swamy, faced harsh prison conditions or delayed medical care, illustrating the judicial system's neglect of human rights under Chandrachud's watch. Tension between justice and politics. The editorial criticizes Chandrachud for his inconsistent application of secular and human rights principles, attributing his compromises to pressures from political and religious expectations. Crux. This editorial critically examines Justice D.Y. Chandrachud's tenure as Chief Justice of India, highlighting the tension between personal beliefs and judicial impartiality, particularly in light of the Ayodhya verdict. Chandrachud's religious disclosures and association with Prime Minister Modi have raised concerns about judicial secularism in India. Although initially seen as a liberal reformist, his term saw significant issues, including prolonged detentions of activists and dissidents. The editorial underscores the complex interplay of religion, politics, and justice in India's highest court, and critiques the influence of personal faith on secular rulings. Key points: balance of power and democratic health. Power needs diffusion across state institutions and levels to prevent authoritarianism and chaos, fostering stability and democracy. The period from 2008 to 2018 saw progress in this area, but recent years under PMLN PPP leadership have seen a re-centralization of authority, erosion of local and provincial autonomy, the rollback of the 18th Amendment's decentralization benefits, and weakening of local bodies have diminished provincial and local autonomy, fueling unrest, especially in peripheral regions like Balochistan and former FATA. Judicial autonomy and legislative overreach. Recent policies and legal adjustments have compromised the autonomy of the Election Commission of Pakistan, ECP, National Accountability Bureau, NAB, and the judiciary. True judicial independence requires a merit-based selection process involving neutral, legally knowledgeable bodies, limiting executive influence. Negative effects of centralized judicial control. The judicial system has suffered from past executive influence in judicial appointments, eroding public trust in judicial independence. Recent examples of judicial pushback, like the High Court judges' stand against agency interference, demonstrate a resilient judiciary when allowed independence. Rise of a shadow power structure. The article alludes to a behind-the-scenes concentration of power in the establishment, diminishing executive effectiveness despite its apparent authority. Consequences of an authoritarian power model. Curtailing democratic avenues like free courts, media, and protest without resolving legitimate grievances could provoke violent unrest or criminality, as seen in other countries facing similar centralized control. The author urges a balanced, decentralized power model to avoid civil discord and ensure democratic stability. Crux. This article critiques the centralization of power in Pakistan's government, arguing that the recent concentration of authority within the executive has led to weakened democratic institutions, including the judiciary, media, and local governments. The author warns that without a legitimate and diffused power structure, the country risks increased civil unrest and instability. For sustainable governance, the piece calls for renewed focus on decentralizing power, promoting judicial independence, and maintaining a balance across state organs to prevent authoritarian dominance. Key points. Outsourcing core versus non-core tasks. Traditionally, HR experts advised against contracting out core jobs that required direct supervision, as these could lead workers to claim status as company employees. Non-core jobs, like housekeeping and gardening, were deemed safer for outsourcing since they don't require the same level of oversight. Supreme Court rulings. Landmark rulings have determined that workers under direct company supervision, even if hired through contractors, are entitled to employment rights as regular staff. In the Fauji Fertilizer Company (FFC) case 2013, the Supreme Court ruled that the company was the principal employer for workers who were directly supervised by company staff, affirming their employment status with the company. Impact on employers' outsourcing practices. Employers are cautioned against using outsourcing solely to cut costs or evade obligations. If a company's staff controls and supervises contract workers, those workers are seen as de facto employees. Guidelines from recent judgments. The recent ruling in IFFCO Pakistan 2024 allows for outsourcing work fully or in parts, as long as agreements comply with labor laws and are not used to bypass employee rights. Companies should ensure contractors provide proper benefits, like Social Security and pensions, as per legal standards. Implementation and compliance. Companies are encouraged to honor these verdicts by ensuring that contractors follow all applicable labor laws and provide essential benefits, reinforcing ethical outsourcing practices. Crux. This article highlights the legal complexities surrounding the outsourcing of labor in Pakistan. It emphasizes that while companies often contract out non-core tasks to save costs, recent Supreme Court judgments clarify that employees under a company's direct supervision or performing core functions may be entitled to regular employment benefits. Employers are advised to follow labor laws strictly and avoid exploitative outsourcing practices. Key points. Importance of regional trade. Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb stressed that neighboring countries should trade with each other for economic and stability gains. Pakistan's trade with regional states is minimal, contributing to South Asia's status as one of the least integrated regions globally. Political hurdles with India. The strained relationship with India is the primary obstacle to regional trade. Improving trade ties could lead to broader positive impacts on bilateral relations. Although the PMLN has a pro-business stance favoring trade with India, other influential stakeholders within the state are reluctant. Current state of cross-border trade. Formal trade with India was halted in 2019 following the revocation of Kashmir's autonomy, but continues informally through smuggling and indirect trade via the UAE. Potential benefits. Trade with India could provide new markets for Pakistani businesses, while India could benefit from accessing Central Asia through Pakistan's route. A mutually beneficial trade relationship could improve economic ties and reduce conflict, as seen in other regions. Necessary supporting infrastructure. To make cross-border trade viable, supportive measures such as relaxed visa policies, direct flights, and functional banking channels are essential. Challenges on both sides. Hardliners in both Pakistan and India, as well as governmental hesitations, are significant barriers to resuming and sustaining trade relations. The 2012 Trade Normalization Blueprint could serve as a foundation for renewed discussions and economic cooperation. Crux. The article emphasizes the importance of regional trade for Pakistan, particularly with neighbors like India, Afghanistan, and Iran. Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb advocates for trade expansion to boost economic growth and stability in South Asia. Despite political tensions, Pakistan could benefit from trade ties with India, leveraging mutual economic interests to pave the way for improved bilateral relations. However, significant barriers remain, including differing stances within Pakistan's government and regional hardliner opposition, which must be addressed for successful trade normalization. Key points: Supreme Court's judgment and ECP's delay. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of allocating reserved seats to PTI, clarifying that recent amendments to the Elections Act by Parliament do not affect this decision. Despite this ruling and a subsequent clarification, the ECP has delayed implementing the court's orders. Speaker Ayaz Sadiq's position. Speaker Ayaz Sadiq criticized the court's judgment, claiming it equates to rewriting the Constitution, and insists on waiting for the ECP's decision before reacting. Last month, he advised the ECP not to allocate the reserved seats to PTI following the amended Elections Act. New Chief Justice's challenge. Chief Justice Yahya Afridi, committed to upholding the separation of powers, now leads the Supreme Court and must decide on enforcing the reserved seats judgment. Although he previously suggested that the ECP should resolve this matter, his stance on the ECP's inaction is yet to be seen. Implications of ECP's defiance. The ECP's reluctance to act has rendered the Supreme Court's directive ineffective, risking further complications if it continues to defy the ruling. The situation reflects a deeper conflict between state institutions, raising questions about judicial authority and constitutional adherence. Potential court proceedings. This unresolved matter will likely be brought before the Supreme Court, marking a critical moment for the judiciary in reaffirming its authority. Compliance from the ECP is essential to end this controversy, as continued defiance could intensify political and legal tensions in Pakistan. Crux. The Election Commission of Pakistan, ECP, faces criticism for its delay in implementing a Supreme Court judgment that directed the allocation of reserved seats to PTI candidates. Despite a second clarification from the court, National Assembly Speaker Ayaz Sadiq has refrained from taking action until the ECP decides, questioning the court's decision and suggesting it might violate constitutional boundaries. With a new Chief Justice now in place, who is committed to enforcing judicial authority, this issue is expected to test the Supreme Court's influence and the ECP's compliance, potentially intensifying an already fraught constitutional crisis. Key points. Rising polio cases. Pakistan is nearing 50 polio cases in 2024, a stark increase from just one case in 2021 and a setback to 20 cases in 2022. The sudden surge is attributed to gaps in immunization coverage, public cooperation, and community trust. National Emergency Action Plan. The government has introduced a National Emergency Action Plan focusing on targeted vaccination efforts, particularly for mobile and migrant populations near the Afghan border. This initiative aims to contain the virus's spread among communities where movement is high. Community engagement. Provinces like Sindh are effectively involving influential community leaders, such as ulema and elected representatives, to bolster vaccination drives. The support of religious leaders is vital in dispelling misinformation and increasing vaccine acceptance in resistant communities. Challenges and transparency issues. Reports of number manipulation have emerged, indicating that some areas may not be adequately covered, necessitating greater transparency and accountability in vaccination efforts. Addressing Balochistan's high infection rates requires ensuring the safety of polio workers, especially in remote areas. Hygiene and sanitation. Poor hygiene and sanitation contribute to the virus's transmission. Hence, tackling these underlying issues is critical for preventing outbreaks. Effective public health messaging should promote parental responsibility regarding vaccination. Call to action. As the third vaccination campaign of the year approaches, there is a need for a unified commitment to action from all stakeholders. A collective effort incorporating rigorous vaccination strategies and clear public health communications is essential to control and eradicate polio in Pakistan. Crux. Pakistan is facing a significant resurgence in polio cases, approaching 50 confirmed cases this year after showing promise with reduced numbers in previous years. The rise in infections highlights critical gaps in vaccination coverage, public trust, and community engagement. The government's National Emergency Action Plan aims to address these issues, particularly among mobile populations near the Afghan border. However, effective grassroots involvement, transparency, and a comprehensive approach to public health and hygiene are essential for successfully combating the virus.